isn't the fundamental problem that we've got that older people vote? People over 60 vote in large numbers, and as a result they get a triple lock on their pension arrangements, they get free bus passes and all the rest of it. Young people on the whole don't vote so assiduously, and we'll probably have students in here with debts and all the rest of it. Do you all, Hilary, then, if I could begin with you, focus inevitably on older people because they vote? Could I incorporate, as I ask each of you that question? We had an interesting question from one of the readers, Ali Hyde. I don't know if she's in the audience here. How do each of you, with your parties, try and get young people involved in your parties? So, if I could, and if on each occasion, I'm going to ask you to be as brief as possible so we can cram as much in as possible. Hilary, if I could begin by you.
Well, Steve, thanks very much. Good evening. Thank you all for coming to this debate. To answer your question directly, no, I don't think inevitably, but you make an important point. People should get stuck in. And so to answer the question that you had submitted, what do we try and do? I think it goes for all of us on the panel, to go to schools, to colleges, to universities, to encourage people. And to answer the question, do I agree? Absolutely not. I do not agree. Now, that is not to say that there are not problems which we as a society are not addressing. I would highlight housing as one. Anyone who is part of Generation Red will know what the problem is. But I would say that politics is the means of trying to solve the problems of the world. And in the past, if you take a historical view, it has led to huge change in our society. If you were young, male and gay growing up in the 1950s, in our society, we put you in prison for being a gay man. We don't do that anymore. And why don't we do that anymore? Because of that. Politics. In the 1930s, young people and old people, people of all ages, if they didn't have any money, couldn't afford to go to the doctor. That doesn't happen anymore. Why not? Because of politics. And the means by which those two things and lots of other changes took place in our society is because people got involved in lots of different ways, and in the end lobbied for change, and that's how change often begins. Politicians may be the last person to get the message, and then through the democratic process voted for change.
Okay, thank you, Hilary. Let's move this way. Kevin, would you accept that, and it might be perfectly legitimate, you've got to win general elections, that there is a disproportionate focus on older people rather than young people because you know they're going to go out and vote? And is your party good enough for young people who tends to have a reputation of having older members, if I can put it politely?
I certainly think there's a problem. If you turn the clock back 50 years, 75% of young people voted, I think 44% of young people voted at the last election. And there is a potential vicious circle that happens here because clearly what politicians are most afraid of, and I've only been a politician for 8 months, but what they're most afraid of is not getting elected next time round. So almost inevitably there's bound to be a focus on how do I get most people out of their homes come election day and vote for me. So I think if we're not careful, we'll end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we do need more young people to be engaged. And I entered politics quite late in life, certainly compared to Stuart. But I got interested in politics when I was 11 or 12, sat around the dining room table with my parents, and I think parents have a huge part to play in this. I think, to the point you made, Steve, I think we are making progress. The 74 colleagues I have that came in the 2015 intake, 10% of BME background, a lot of different career backgrounds, 35% are women, so we're making progress as a party. We've got an awful lot more to do. We need to engage more with young people. Certainly what we did around our hustings, we did 8 hustings over the election campaign in schools to try and engage with young people, to try and understand. Hopefully we feel we have a message that can suit everybody's needs and is around improving the economy, is around giving people access to the housing market, which is of huge importance to young people and something we can easily take for granted.
And Natalie, I assume with your party you do have quite a young membership. Is that right? I haven't checked the figures recently.
About 30% of the membership of the Green Party is young Greens, so people under 30, which I'm pretty confident is the highest of any party.
In percentage terms?
Yep.
Yeah. And why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's partly because obviously we have policies that appeal to young people. Zero university tuition fees is a very obvious one. But actually what I find when I talk to colleges, universities, schools, actually what's even more important to young people is that we say that our schools, our universities should not be exam factories where pupils are shoved through exam after exam after exam. And we highlight issues like the fact that among under 16s, the rate of depression has doubled in the past 10 years. We are really saying we get that you, as a generation, have been put under enormous pressure. You know, generation rent, particularly in London, but around the country, young people struggling, they're not thinking about the housing ladder. That's a distant dream. Thinking about being able to rent a flat on your own. And you know, our mayoral candidate in London, Sian Berry, she's a renter herself. She knows what it's like to be clinging on. And so we are speaking to those experiences. But I think addressing the broader question, one of the things I want to make sure we don't do tonight is politics, historically, until quite recently, was failing young people, and it did seem irrelevant. But it's changing, and it's changing fast. But I don't want to blame young people for not voting. I want to blame politicians and politics for the fact that it hasn't seemed relevant, it hasn't seemed to speak to people, and therefore they haven't got engaged. And a really good example of that is the Scottish referendum. 16 and 17-year-olds got the vote. They turned out in almost the same percentages as older people, and we had nearly a 95% turnout. When politics is mattered, when the debate happens on the ground, people do vote.
Okay, thank you, which is a perfect segue into Stuart, our final panellist. To some extent, this is the referendum did attract a lot of young support. Could I just ask you a slightly different question, then we could open it out? And that is, I think you were 23 when you went to the House of Commons last summer. Is it an alienating place for young people? It's quite old-fashioned and ritualistic. It does many important things that affect the lives of everyone in this hall. But is it did you feel odd when you went there, or did you feel at ease with the environment?
I think the most difficult thing when I went into Parliament is being the second youngest. Mary Black was the youngest, and she was 20, and everyone knew who Mary Black was. Nobody knew who Stuart Donaldson was. So I would walk about, and you know, as an MP you have a pass, but the staff, you know, would think, you know, he's a member of staff or he's a researcher. So there would be places I would go and I would be told very politely to leave until they found out I was an MP. So so that's happened, and it still happens to me. It happened to me last week. It's just something that I've had to get used to. But you know, that can, you know, I've kind of made a joke of it and taken it in my stride. But if you had less thick skin, I think you could find that alienating and quite discouraging.
Yeah, I suppose that could happen anywhere, really,
Yes,
couldn't it? Are you okay with the rituals, the gladiatorial thing, very different from the Scottish Parliament, actually? Does that work for you, excite you, make issues accessible?
I think the main issue for me that is so frustrating is the voting in Westminster. You have to queue up and get your name ticked off a register for each vote, and that's 650 people they have to do that for each time. So if you're doing 4 votes, that takes, it can take from 40 minutes to an hour. I find that is, very, very backward, and I would like to see that move forward into the 20th century, at least if not the 21st century.
Okay, thank you very much for those opening thoughts. I think the best way, don't worry if you don't want to do it, but if we could take 2 or 3 questions, and then I might select one panelist, 2 panelists, but we've got to try and cram in as much as possible. So who would like to ask the first question from the audience? The guy there, have you got mics or have you got to shout? I think the mic is coming over to you. If you say your name and keep the question obviously as short as possible so we can get as many in as possible. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Javad. One area of politics which often is overlooked, not just by young people, but Britain as a whole is local government, and local government tends to be dominated mostly by older people who've been around the block a few times now. How do we get more young people involved in local government, because it's such an important aspect of governance of this country?
Are you involved in local government?
Yeah, I'm a candidate in the elections this May.
For this coming May?
Yeah, this coming May.
Okay, thanks, that's a good question. Anyone from this side? Lady over there. I think the mic is coming. Did everyone hear that question? It's a bit echoing. Great. Okay, sorry, your question. If you could say who you are and the question. Thank you.
I'm Sam. I have a question specifically for the SNP MP. Is that okay?
Sorry?
I have a question specifically for the SNP.
SNP,
Is that
absolutely,
okay?
yeah.
I was going to ask, obviously before the most recent election, your party campaigned sort of on a single issue of not wanting to be a member of the UK anymore. So to me it seems almost contradictory to then run so passionately about then representing Scotland in the UK Parliament. Why go down that route and not more of a Sinn Féin route where you don't take your seats?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. The Speaker, John Burke, told me the thing that had struck him more about this Westminster Parliament than anything else was your assiduous, not you personally, your entire group, attending every debate. When any one of your colleagues spoke, you were all there. Sort of almost saying, we really like this Westminster Parliament, even though we want out. A third question, let's go to the front and then we'll take some at the side in the next round.
I'm Sam. Many of you have talked about going into schools as a way of trying to encourage youngsters to be involved in politics. How would you, those that are not just disincentivised with politics but also disincentivised with schools, how would you reach out to those people and distinguish between the two things?
Sorry, distinguish
between school and politics as very different issues that they should be treating in different ways. Treat politics as the same.
Okay, great, thank you, some good questions. Sure, I'll leave you for the SNP one, if that's okay. Now you were responding with some enthusiasm to the one about local government and getting young people involved there. So could you answer that one to begin with, Natalie? And I might ask the other two about politics at school, and you on that, and then we've got time. So,
Yes, well, I think one of the things we have to do, and this isn't specifically a young people response, is people have to feel like local government has power, has control, can actually make a difference. And with the government's hideous process of austerity that's seen local government services slashed away to the bone, cut away, and local government seems like they're not providing libraries, they're not providing children's centres anymore. What are they doing? They're only providing the statutory services, so they're just like an arm of central government. You see situations with planning. Take, for example, the issue of fracking. Lancashire County Council, under a great deal of pressure, with a great deal of public input, said we do not want fracking, we're turning down this planning decision on planning grounds, and then the central government calls it in. So one of the things we need to do to get local government more relevant to everybody is actually genuinely, I can't really use the word localism anymore because Eric Pickles basically destroyed that word. Let's refer the power down locally to local people, not the kind of fake devolution handed down from Westminster, but actually deliver real power, the resources to actually do things locally. And then I think people will feel like local government is something they really want to get engaged in, people of all ages.
do you think more young people would get involved if there was a sense that they had real power rather than sort of power determined by Whitehall?
Yeah, I think if people knew the extent of the services which local government provides, because a lot of the services that are going on social care, care for the elderly, care for the young.
Yeah, even at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, so people knew about what local government currently does, because a lot of the services they think are provided by central government, local government actually does. So if people were more educated, especially young people, for example, if you did go into schools, educate them about the functions of local government, then they would become more interested, they'd become more involved in it.
Okay, brilliant, thanks. Kevin, schools, should politics be taught as a matter of course? Is there a danger that if people are sort of not enjoying school, they will be even more disenchanted with politics if it's imposed on them? What is the chance of generating interest in politics within schools?
Well, can I just touch on the question first, just
Yeah.
in terms of local government, because just generally, how do we get more people, more young people to step forward? how do we get more people generally to step forward? The question I would like to ask, because the short time I've been in politics, I stood for the first time in 2007. I didn't get a lot of encouragement, I felt, to people saying, come along, you'd be decent. Maybe they thought I wouldn't be decent, but if we spot good people who want to be in politics, we as politicians and society generally should try and get those people to come into local government or into Westminster. And I certainly think in terms of local government, the devolution revolution is going to give you a lot more power and influence over matters locally. So hopefully that will be a good reason. We've got two of the youngest councillors in the country in Rydale District Council in my constituency. One of it is only 22 years old, one of it was the leader of the chair of the council. So there is opportunity for people if they're willing to step forward, and real power with that. In terms of schools, absolutely, I think we should. Current affairs and politics are fascinating subjects. I'm not saying we should force people to take exams in them and pick up Natalie's point. Some of what we should get in education is an holistic education in all the things that matter, not just in terms of passing exams, but also in terms of things that really matter in the world. Current affairs, politics, all that stuff was back to that dining room table for me and gave me the inspiration many, many years ago. 40 years later, I was still inspired by that and willing to step forward and do this.
So Kevin, can I ask if you're going to pick that Caroline Lucas's PSHE education bill to broaden that education, guarantee sex and relationship education, finance education, a much broader education in food, nutrition?
I absolutely feel we should have a much broader education. I was a governor at school, at a school that didn't just believe we should try and beat the system. Absolutely, we're trying to get rounded education for people. But I think that should be down to head teachers, great head teachers, who pick good teachers and motivate good teachers and provide a school, give them the autonomy to run that school in the way they see fit.
Okay. Start the Tory Green Alliance, but I think it just moved away towards the end. Hillary, you are an evangelist, and I know you always have been for politics. Obviously, you're Labour, but you, as your first answer suggested, what could schools do to generate that sense of connections that you began to talk about in your first answer? And are there some dangers in that as well?
Well, I think the first thing is not to be afraid to do what we're doing here tonight, which is gathering together to talk about what's going on in the world with a range of view. I think some schools are worried because if they have one person in from one party, then a parent might complain, well, why have you not had someone else? So it's giving the school the confidence to do that. And I think for all of us that are involved in politics, if we get an invitation to go and talk to the school, really keen to do that. I very much agree with what you said in answering the first question about the range of responsibilities of local authorities. If you think about our community, something goes wrong, what will people say to each other? Council should do something about it. And it is the means to an end. And I am passionate about devolution of power precisely because, one, it brings us all face to face with choices that have to be made in life. We experience those personally, and the same is true of politics. iDebate famously said, socialism is the language of priorities. And so I want to see schools making education about how our democracy works, how politics works, part of the curriculum, because it's about giving us, when we're young, the tools to do the job. And I just wanted to say to you, Stuart, if it's any consolation given your experience wandering around Parliament, when Keir Hardie first arrived in 1892, in the era when MPs all wore frock coats, and he turned up in his working clothes, and the doorkeepers looked him up and down and said, "Are you here to work on the roof?" And Keir Hardie replied famously, "No, I'm here to work on the floor of the House of Commons." And he, of course, was the first independent Labour member of Parliament. So, it's happening.
And so on that point about the SNP of Westminster, you don't want to be there, and yet you are very much there. As said, Berko has been struck by the degree to which you all attend debates and so on. Why have you opted for that approach rather than saying, right, we disapprove of this place, we want nothing to do with it?
Sam, I thought you raised a very interesting issue there. The SNP has always believed in engaging in the democratic process rather than shunning it. I was elected to represent West Aberdeenshire and Carden, my home constituency where I've lived, I don't think I could look the people in the eye there if I said, yes, thank you for electing me, I'm not going to go down and do the job I was elected to do. Thanks very much though, and I'll take some of the benefits that come with being an MP. And there are many things in Scotland that are controlled and debated and decided in Westminster. So I think it would be utterly irresponsible of me to not go down there and take part in those debates and in that decision making.
Okay, thank you very much.
Steve, I don't think anyone really addressed and speaking to people who aren't in schools or are dissatisfied with schools. So I do have to reflect back on probably the easiest hustings I ever did as a candidate, and that was at a local group for NEETs, people who are not in education, employment or training. And really all they had to do to get them interested in politics was mention our drugs policy. They got very interested in politics at that point.
That's one way of doing it, I guess. But, okay, so let's go to the front row on the side there, the guy there. If you just wait for the mic, it'll be rushed to you. Colin, on the far side of the front row, the guy that just so we cool, yeah.
Hi. I think it's all well and good blaming young people for not being involved in politics, but I think governments are elected to represent the whole country, and perhaps if parties did something to, something that young people believed in, then maybe more people would be engaged. Labour first introduced tuition fees, and then they were again raised by the last Tory government. If you want to see young involvement in politics, it was on the streets outside Westminster. There was everybody was talking about tuition fees, and everybody still talks about it at university. Nobody's happy. And how we represented, Ed Miliband offered a slightly reduced tuition fees. The only real option to represent what young people actually want was the Green Party. So essentially what I'm saying is, are young people to blame, or maybe parties should do more to represent what young people believe, because everybody knows what we believe in certain respects.
And for you, the pivotal way to do that would be to scrap tuition fees altogether, not the Miliband scrapping them.
I think that's just symbolic. I'm not saying that tuition fees are the be-all and end-all. And it's not even that, it's also obviously scrapping the grants and the things that help people from, low backgrounds.
Thank you very much. Go to the other side. So in the middle, so we're just getting a geographical representation of the whole.
How can we get more young people to stand for elections when many MPs have been special advisors, have the connections and networks, and can actually afford to stand for election?
Interesting question. And at the front here, please.
Hi, my name is Lauren. If I'm honest with you, it is completely disparaging and patronising that my parents can vote in the EU referendum, but some 16 and 17-year-olds cannot. And, I want to know whether you all think that this is a failure of our government, and whether you think that the consequence of this exclusivity, because it is exclusive, it really is, and it's not fair. I couldn't vote in the May election because I was a month too young, and it's not fair. And I want to know whether you think that this exclusivity is something to be proud of.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's begin then with, let's begin with that one. Now, I know that most of the panel agree with you, but I suspect, Kevin, you voted against it. It was debated recently in the House of Commons, and Hilary, I assume you would have done because you are nearly that sort of age. I know you would have done if you were there. But Kevin, I assume you voted against because, explain why you're against 16-year-olds having a vote in the referendum.
Because I thought it was the wrong time to change the rules on voting. And I think the age of consent is all over the different place, all over the place in terms of you can go to war at 16, you can't drink till you're 18, you can't vote till you're 18. We need to have a common position on it, but the status quo where we are at the moment is 18 to vote. So I think just to change it now for the referendum would have been the wrong thing. in principle, if we change it to 16 across the board, I don't have a major issue with that, but the general election should reflect EU referendum, in my view.
But so if people had the vote in the general election at 16, then you would have been all right
Absolutely.
about it.
Absolutely.
Briefly on that, please.
Briefly, I've got to say, the referendum is the point where you're making irrevocable decisions effective for decades. If there's one case where there is an overwhelming argument, a general election lasts for at most 5 years. The referendum, the EU decision, is potentially irrevocable. So that's exactly an argument when arguing for the long-term future. It'd be a great place to start with votes at 16.
Okay. Tuition fees. It was introduced by your government, the Labour government. It then tripled. And then you went into an election with a cut, but still keeping them, which obviously remained an issue for most students, but not in a way. I think Ed Miliband thought, that's it, I'm going to win over the students here. And clearly he didn't do. What's your response to that? Given how evangelical you are about young getting involved, tuition fees remains a real issue.
Look, I'm also evangelical about politics being about having to make choices. Now, at the moment, we are fighting the disappearance of the maintenance grant in the House of Commons. And we had a vote recently. I'm afraid we lost because we didn't win the election. Look, the argument in the past was when we originally moved from the grant to the loan-based system, the argument was made very strongly, young people will not be able to go into higher education. That was the argument. And at each of the changes, the same argument was made. If you look at the graph, what has it shown over the years? That's what's happened. Now, why? Because we know how important higher education is to us as individuals, although there's a problem about the kind of jobs that young people who are graduating now get, and we know that. I know that as a parent. And also we know how important it is for the future of the country. So we made the judgment that the cut that we proposed at the last election was to ease some of that impact, but there's lots of other things that we want to do, and the thing about being in politics and public life is every minute of the day people are saying to you, come on, what are you going to do about this, what are you going to do about that? Can I just say one thing about 16 and 17-year-olds, because we moved the amendment on the referendum bill to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. Our policy is we should change the law so 16 and 17-year-olds can vote in all elections, and I just observe, if at 16 you can have sex, you can pay tax, you can join the armed forces, you can be a company director. I didn't know that until I looked into it. Any of you fancy being a company director, if any of you are 16, and you can consent to medical treatment, then I'm absolutely sure that you can be trusted to take part in this decision. And the thing about the referendum is, this is about the future of the country, not just for the 5 years that is the term of a parliament. It's about our place in the world for the next 40, 50, 60 years. And in the end, who's that going to affect? In one sense, most of all, I'm not going to be here in 60 years' time. You are. You should have the right to vote.
Could I, before we deal with special advisors and becoming MPs, just out of interest, because Cameron has sort of unveiled his negotiation today, this is what Jonathan did will be on any question, say just a bit of fun, the rest of it. Whether you're under 18 or over 18, how many of you want to stay in the European Union? Put your hands up. Wow. And how many want out? Well, this entirely scientifically representative audience suggests there's going to be a landslide for us staying in.
How many of you are on the electoral register? Right, good.
Right. Okay.
Just checking.
Yeah, we'll have a lot
If you've fallen off, get back on.
Okay, there was a fascinating question as well about how you become... Sorry? Who wants to stay in Europe? I think if this was on the BBC at the moment, we might have issues about balance in terms of debate. Special advisors and becoming an MP. Did any of you... Well, there are 3 in Parliament at the moment. Did any of you take the special advisor route? I don't think many of you did.
No.
No.
Can I just say, it's astounded me actually the number of people, the number of new colleagues who did have connections with Parliament before they became a member of Parliament. So if you want to go down that political track, whether you become a special advisor or whatever, clearly it's important to have those kind of relationships. For me, I'm completely new to the whole thing, but that is certainly a factor in your likely opportunity to get into Parliament.
Yeah, that's true with Labour as well, actually, isn't it? I know you do.
Well, I was for 2 years.
Oh,
I'm not going to apologise for it. Now, how did I get elected as a Member of Parliament here? I was one of 4 candidates shortlisted by the Labour Party. I am from London, I'm a West Londoner, and I turned up in Leeds on a Thursday night with a membership list, knowing nobody, and I spent 4 days trying to meet Labour Party members, and on the Monday night, 150 odd people, I mean odd in terms of it could have been 151, 152, turned up at Elland Road. They heard 4 speeches, they asked questions, they voted, and they chose me as the Labour candidate. And I think that the moral in that sense is get involved. Because if you want to stand for elected office, join a party, get involved, show that you're interested, have a go, and you lose, have a go again, and you lose. Keep up. Because Parliament is full of people who stood before, people who were councillors, and who weren't successful. If you're really, really determined, that's what I would say on the basis of my own experience, because I stood twice for Parliament and lost. The first time I stood for the council, I lost. If you really want to do it, don't give up.
So we do want people from different backgrounds to come forward. It
Exactly.
doesn't want to just be people that's politically connected.
And the problem with what you're saying, Hilary, is it's easy to say if you have a bit of money behind you, you have professional opportunities. If you're a single mum with caring responsibilities, the cost of doing that is really significant. You're saying stand and fail again, but the traditional large party pattern is people stand in safe seats for the other side a couple of times, cut their wings that way. That costs money, that costs massive amounts of time. Huge numbers of people do not have that time, do not have that money. And yeah, we've been talking about spags, but the issue is much wider than that. You know, there was much celebration. Parliament this time, they got to 29% female. We're somewhere around about 50th ranked in world parliaments in terms of our percentage of female MPs. And then black and minority ethnic people, much lower again. Disabled people, much lower again. And one of the things that the Green Party is calling for is job share MPs, so that 2 people can stand as a job share. You can job share pretty well every other job in the country. Why not an MP? And that would open it up to many more people who've got caring responsibilities, who've got professional jobs, who've got disabilities. Share the job, open it up. That and lots more we need to do to open up politics.
I think for getting more young people involved in politics, particularly from the example of the Scottish referendum, we saw 16, 17-year-olds could vote in that referendum, and then that opened up, you know, now 16, 17-year-olds can vote in the Scottish parliamentary elections, and loads of young people got involved in the arguments and things like that, and now we have, the SNP have 6 MPs under 30, which is you know, quite significant. And you know, I worked for a member of the Scottish Parliament. I followed kind of the same route that Hilary has done, apart from it wasn't 150 members, it was 1,500 members that I had to do, and I was also against 4 other people, and it wasn't 4 days, it was a month that I had to go around knocking on doors in January and February to try and get it. And you know, these people, all these people were, you know, they were older than me, they were significantly more experienced than me, but you know, at the end of the day, it is, you know, it's about you, and you know, if you're good enough, you're old enough, and that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. This side, in the right, Mike is very close to you. Thank you.
Hi. When I was at school, I studied politics at A-level, but even before that, I'd always had an interest, but it was always sort of picked up as politics is boring, why are you interested in politics? How do we spice it up? How do we get, I know it's almost an impossible question, but you know, like, being told that politics is boring by all your friends is really quite off-putting, so how do we make this change?
Yeah, it's a good question. Should we go to the second row here, please? The mic is just coming.
Hi, my name's Florence. As already has been discussed on the panel, a lot of young people do want to vote for kind of small parties like the Green Party. But certain members of the panel don't actually support proportional representation. So what it sounds like is that you're saying we do want young people to vote, but we want young people to vote for us. And you're actually limiting young people's choices by not supporting proportional representation and not letting us vote for the parties that we're passionate about.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the back row. Yeah, I think it's coming. No, thank you.
There's been a lot of talk about getting young people involved in politics. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of young people aren't involved in politics. They don't care about politics. And as much as you try and change that, you will probably have limited success. Young people have lots of other things on their minds. Is it not the time to introduce compulsory voting and compulsory political education to ensure that no matter what your level of involvement and excitement is about politics, you still have your say on voting day?
Okay, great questions. If we could sort of look together at the two voting questions. Hilary, are you against, did you want PR or some kind of electoral system? But proportion, are you against proportional representation?
I voted for AV in the referendum. Now, I know that's not a fully proportional system, but I voted for it, and I'm sorry the country didn't. I'm in favour of an AV elected House of Commons and a PR elected second chamber. Because the truth is, both systems have their strengths and weaknesses, and it seems to me you would get your proportionality in the elected second chamber. It's ridiculous we still have an appointed House of Lords, and because I think the link between a Member of Parliament and his or her constituency that AV still enables you to have, as opposed to the constituency members and then the proportional top-ups, I think that is the best way to balance it. That's what I would have, and I'm very sad that we still haven't got around to getting rid of this anachronism that is the House of Lords.
Do you think, I mean, obviously you prefer if everyone voted Labour, but do you think it will be a good thing if what we see in the next few years is a proliferation of lots of parties? We're seeing it with the SNP, we might see it with the Greens. I mean, you didn't break through in terms of parliamentary representation. Or would you actually prefer in the end, you're a Labour politician, people to vote Labour or Tory and have that familiar battle?
Look, I hope that people will vote Labour, but whatever people's political beliefs, stand up for them, argue for them, present them. To answer your question, I don't think, as you probably gather, I don't think politics is boring at all. It isn't, because it's about life, how we're going to deal with the problems that we've got. You look around the world at the moment, we've debated what do we do about the conflict in the Middle East and Syria? How do we deal with the refugees? Climate change. Now, there's a really good example of the power of politics to make a change. I was looking at the figures on the train coming up. There was a campaign from the bottom up called The Big Ask, saying, we've got to do something about climate change. We should have a Climate Change Act in Britain. We were the first country in the world to pass the Climate Change Act. I happened to be a member of the government that did it. And do you know what? The figures, I was just looking, CO2 emissions in Britain are now 29% lower in 2014 than they were in 1990. And if in 1990 you'd said to people, we need to do something about CO2 emissions, well, you never do anything about CO2 emissions, the population's increasing, it'll never happen, can't be done. Well, as a society, we have made progress, and it was politics, bottom up, and Parliament getting the message. So, whatever your view, argue a case, stand for election. If you win, well, good luck to you, because that's democracy.
Do any of the panel believe in compulsory voting?
No.
I think there's a case for it.
The problem with compulsory voting is you're suggesting that the problem is the voters. I don't think the problem is the voters, the problem is the politics and the system they're being presented with. Fix that. And as we saw in the Scottish referendum, then the turnout will fix itself.
I do think we could make voting easier. As Stuart pointed out, it's an anachronism how we vote in the chamber. We did actually vote for the first time on an iPad a week or so ago, but to be able to vote on a mobile phone would be a good evolution. I think in terms of the question about is politics boring, I think we've all got a part to play with parents or school teachers. In my sixth form, we always used to sit around the common room talking about politics, so We need to get that excitement back into politics. I think politicians have a huge part to play, of course. I think we need to be principled. I think we've absolutely made huge mistakes in the past, which has given people the impression that all politicians are the same. You've got 650 people in Westminster. You're going to have the good, bad and the ugly. But we need to be more principled. Having the kind of related jobs after politics gives us a bad name. Expensive scandals give us a bad name. All these things, we need to clean up our act. I've got to say, Steve, from the press's point of view as well, there is this kind of dichotomy between the press and politics. Different dynamics. Politics should be long-term strategic. Press is urgent and dynamic. Therefore, the press do tend to sometimes portray politicians as being either incompetent or corrupt. And I think this does deter good people from stepping forward. And we need good people to step forward.
I think an important point to remember about getting involved in politics is it's not just party politics you can get involved in. You can get in a single issue that you care about. Our inbox are flooding on a daily basis from people signing petitions with change or 38 degrees, and that is a way, if you just care about one issue, you don't have to get involved in a party and start campaigning and knocking on doors. It can just be one issue that you are passionate about, and then just focus on that, and that is you getting politically active and politically involved.
Far more than ever before. There's a 17-year-old member of the Youth Parliament from Cornwall who the day after the election, he was so angry about the least proportional election result in British history that he started a petition. 2 weeks later, he was outside number 10 Downing Street with me and with other political leaders, including with Nigel Farage. So I can thank Owen for giving Nigel Farage the chance to photobomb me. I don't know why Nigel Farage wanted to photobomb me, but that's life. But the reason why Owen was out there, and all of us were there, because he was a 17-year-old who'd started a petition that then 250,000 people had signed in the next 2 weeks. So politics can be something that you can do as an individual, something you're passionate about. Don't have politics done to you, do politics, and you can change your whole society. Who knows, maybe that's the start of the change to the political system.
That brings up a question that one of the readers submitted. Laura, you were mentioning there, Natalie, social media, how it can be empowering. But this is the question, it's interesting, we were talking about this before coming on to the stage. Is the age of the internet more damaging or positive for the perception of British politics among young people, Twitter and all the rest of it, blogging? Well, as a young person, and also a politician, sorry, as a middle-aged young person for the SNP, what do you think? This era where politics moves so fast now because of Twitter, we know things that are going on in shadow cabinet meetings as they're happening because of Twitter.
I think the internet has actually been brilliant in opening up politics and making it more accessible for particularly for young people. And I use the example of the Scottish referendum again. 16, 17,000 young people knew all the arguments and they knew what was going on much quicker than their parents did or older people did because they had access to the internet. There is a lot of rubbish shared on Facebook.
Yes, it got quite vicious in the referendum, didn't it? There was a big argument about cybernats.
I mean, it's a tiny proportion of people who take it a bit too far. But I think, overall, the debate in Scotland was excellent. It was very healthy, as well as online. But yeah, just watch out for people saying things online that aren't actually true and people take them as read.
Anyone on the panel worried about social media and its impact on politics, especially with young people? Very much. Now, sadly, a lot of young people, except for everyone in this hall, don't buy papers. They look at Twitter and blogging. Is this good for?
Well, it's technology, it's change, you can't stop it, and it can be used for good purposes, and it can be used for bad purposes. And going back to the point that was made earlier, and Natalie made it forcefully about encouraging people to get involved, you look at some of the stuff that elected members of Parliament, councillors, other people in public life have to put up with on Twitter. Now, I'm old-fashioned. I believe that you should introduce yourself to someone before you insult them. But because people are hiding behind a handle and they think no one's going to know who they are, they can say whatever they like about you. Now, you have to remember that that is not the real world, although we all take these things personally as an individual, but it's not the real world, so it can be used for good or ill. But I think the story that Natalie just told about the the young person who started that petition, tells us that this is a means of getting your message out there. And in the old days, you had to have money and a printing press. You either had to have a very loud voice and could shout to a very large number of people, or, when printing was invented, you had to have a printing press. Now, you can just get your phone, and if people are going to follow you, you can speak out. And that's useful for politicians to make a comment on what's happening in the world, to find out what's happening. It's a fantastic resource for every single one of us. But it's the purpose for which you use it that matters. And I think one of the threads running through our discussion this evening is, what is it you care about? What is important to you in life? What do you want to see happen? What do you want to see change? And politics is the means by which you can then achieve all of those things. But the starting point has to be, I want to hang on to what, this is a beautiful area, let's protect it, let's have national parks. Or the housing market isn't working, I want to see a change. So we've got a chance of building more homes.
It's really interesting, sorry, can I just say, because I bet some of you do it, some bloggers have now had as much influence on politics as paid columnists. It's a massive change. Very bad news for paid columnists, but we're a dying breed. And because some bloggers, I can name them, who, some of them actually students now, are having a big impact on the national debate. It's extraordinary.
And I want to say, I think that's one of the things that's positive, because I think it's worth turning this question around and saying, is the mainstream media negative for the perception of politics? And I think a lot of the mainstream right-wing media, owned by a few media tycoons, whether it's giving access, utterly unreasonable access, to people who are climate change deniers, whether it's focusing on politics as being about how Ed Miliband eats a bacon sandwich, or how deeply Corbyn bows at the cenotaph, that mainstream media is doing massive damage to politics. And it's great that the internet is there as a counteraction to that.
I would say that. All media is right-wing, mainstream media is left-wing media as well, and I think media is absolutely incumbent upon media to be balanced, to be fair. And you can all quote examples of where that hasn't happened on both sides of the fence. In terms of, is the internet been good for politics? I absolutely think it has, because knowledge is power. Knowledge is, and the information that you hold is far more important than legislation. You get to change legislation on the back of what you know. So, is this a good thing for democracy? Is this a good thing for the future of the internet? Absolutely, it is.
Okay, we're almost out of time. We're about to have this dramatic vote. Before I do, there's a question from one of the iReaders submitted here. I just want one-word answers. I think I know what they're going to be, but who knows? There might be an outbreak of candour here. If you were a young person now, in 2016, so pretend you're a bit older. If you're a young person now, do you think you would support the party you currently represent? Hillary?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
That was easy.
I don't believe any of them. No. I do. Now, I'm afraid, time goes so quickly on these evenings, so we are ready now to have a vote. Now, what would be good and more interesting, I think, is to vote on the basis of what you've heard this evening, as much as whether you kind of generally think politics is great or not great. So on the basis of the last hour, here is the question. British politics does nothing for young people. Those in favour, please put your yes card up, please. Okay. Jonathan didn't feel any questions. I always think lies, because you just can't tell, it's on the radio. But I reckon what's that? Well, let's see the other. Those who, might have to have a recap. Those who disagree, put your I know cards up, please. Right, okay. Well, it looks closer at first, but I think we can say it's an overwhelming vote no tonight. So thank you very much indeed for your questions. Thanks again to our sponsors, Future Finance. Thanks for voting. Please continue the discussion with the drink upstairs, and thank the panel too. Thank you all very much. older people vote. People over 60 vote in large numbers, and as a result they get a triple lock on their pension arrangements, they get free bus passes and all the rest of it. Young people on the whole don't vote so assiduously, and will probably have students in here with debts and all the rest of it. Do you all, Hilary, then, if I could begin with you, focus inevitably on older people because they vote? Could I incorporate, as I ask each of you that question? We had an interesting question from one of the readers, Ali Hyde. I don't know if she's in the audience here. How did each of you, with your parties, try and get young people involved in your parties? So if I could, and if on each occasion I'm going to ask you to be as brief as possible so we can cram as much in as possible. Hilary, if I could begin by you.
Well, Steve, thanks very much. Good evening. Thank you all for coming to this debate. To answer your question directly, no, I don't think inevitably, but you make an important point. People should get stuck in. And so to answer the question that you had submitted, what do we try and do? I think it goes through all of us on the panel, to go to schools, to colleges, to universities, to encourage people. And to answer the question, do I agree? Absolutely not. I do not agree. Now, that is not to say that there are not problems which we as a society are not addressing. I would highlight housing as one. Anyone who is part of Generation Red will know what the problem is. But I would say that politics is the means of trying to solve the problems of the world. And in the past, if you take a historical view, it has led to huge change in our society. If you were young, male and gay growing up in the 1950s, in our society, we put you in prison for being a gay man. We don't do that anymore. And why don't we do that anymore? Because of that. Politics. In the 1930s, young people and old people, people of all ages, if they didn't have any money, couldn't afford to go to the doctor. That doesn't happen anymore. Why not? Because of politics. And the means by which those two things and lots of other changes took place in our society is because people got involved in lots of different ways, and in the end, lobbied for change, and that's how change often begins. Politicians may be the last person to get the message, and then through the democratic process, voted for change.
Okay, thank you, Hilary. Let's move this way. Kevin, would you accept that, and it might be perfectly legitimate, you've got to win general elections, that there is a disproportionate focus on older people rather than young people because you know they're going to go out and vote? And is your party good enough for young people who tends to have a reputation of having older members, if I can put it politely?
I certainly think there's a problem. If you turn the clock back 50 years, 75% of young people voted, I think 44% of young people voted at the last election. And there is a potential vicious circle that happens here because clearly what politicians are most afraid of, and I've only been a politician for 8 months, but what they're most afraid of is not getting elected next time round. So almost inevitably there's bound to be a focus on how do I get most people out of their homes come election day and vote for me. So I think if we're not careful, we'll end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we do need more young people to be engaged. And I entered politics quite late in life, certainly compared to Stuart. And but I
reach out to those people and distinguish between the two things.
Sorry, distinguish
between school and politics as very different issues that they should be treating in different ways. Treat politics as the same.
Okay, great, thank you, some good questions. Sure, I'll leave you for the SNP one, if that's okay. Now you were responding with some enthusiasm to the one about local government and getting young people involved there. So could you answer that one to begin with, Natalie? And I might ask the other two about politics at school, and you on that, and then we've got time. So.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things we have to do, and this isn't specifically a young people response, is people have to feel like local government has power, has control, can actually make a difference. And with the government's hideous process of austerity that's seen local government services slashed away to the bone, cut away, and local government seems like they're not providing libraries, they're not providing children's centres anymore. What are they doing? They're only providing the statutory services, so they're just like an arm of central government. You see situations with planning. Take, for example, the issue of fracking. Lancashire County Council, under a great deal of pressure, with a great deal of public input, said we do not want fracking, we're turning down this planning decision on planning grounds, and then the central government calls it in. So one of the things we need to do to get local government more relevant to everybody is actually genuinely, I can't really use the word localism anymore because Eric Pickles basically destroyed that word. Let's refer the power down locally to local people, not the kind of fake devolution handed down from Westminster, but actually deliver real power, the resources to actually do things locally. And then I think people will feel like local government is something they really want to get engaged in, people of all ages.
Do you think more young people would get involved if there was a sense that they had real power rather than sort of power determined by white or...
Yeah, I think it could be the extent of the services which local government provides, because a lot of the services that are going on social care, care for the elderly, care for the young.
Yeah, even at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, so people knew about what local government currently does, because a lot of the services I think are provided by central government, local government actually does. So if people were more educated, especially young people, for example, if you did go into schools, educate them about the functions of local government, then they would become more interested, they'd become more involved in it.
Okay, brilliant, thanks. Kevin, schools, should politics be taught as a matter of course? Is there a danger that if people are sort of not enjoying school, they will be even more disenchanted with politics if it's imposed on them? What is the chance of generating interest in politics within schools?
Well, can I just touch on the question first, just in terms of local government, because just generally, how do we get more people, more young people to step forward? How do we get more people generally to step forward? The question I would like to ask, because the short time I've been in politics, I stood for the first time in 2007. I didn't get a lot of encouragement, I felt, to people saying, come along, you'd be decent. Maybe they thought I wouldn't be decent, but if we spot good people who want to be in politics, we as politicians and society generally should try and get those people to come into local government or into Westminster. And I certainly think in terms of local government, the devolution revolution is going to give you a lot more power and influence over matters locally. So hopefully that will be a good reason. We've got two of the youngest councillors in the country in Rydale District Council in my constituency. One of it is only 22 years old, one of it was the leader of the chair of the council. So there is opportunity for people if they're willing to step forward and real power with that. In terms of schools, absolutely, I think we should. Current affairs.
As an MP you have a pass, but the staff, would think, he's a member of staff or he's a researcher. So there would be places I would go and I would be told very politely to leave until they found out I was an MP. So, so that's happened, and it still happens to me. It happened to me last week. It's just something that I've had to get used to. But that can, I've kind of made a joke of it and taken it in my stride. But if you had less thick skin, I think you could find that alienating and quite discouraging.
Yeah, I suppose that could happen anywhere, really, couldn't it? Are you okay with the rituals, the gladiatorial thing? Very different from the Scottish Parliament, actually. Does that work for you inside you? Make issues accessible?
I think the main issue for me that is so frustrating is the voting in Westminster. You have to queue up and get your name ticked off a register for each vote, and that's 650 people they have to do that for each time. So if you're doing 4 votes, that takes, it can take from 40 minutes to an hour. I find that is, very, very backward, and I would like to see that move forward into the 20th century, at least if not the 21st century.
Okay, thank you very much for those opening thoughts. I think the best way, don't worry if you don't want to do it, but if we could take 2 or 3 questions and then I might select 1 panelist, 2 panelists, but we've got to try and crowd in as much as possible. So who would like to ask the first question from the audience? The guy there, have you got mics or have you got to shout? I think the mic is coming over to you. If you could say your name and keep the question obviously as short as possible so we can get as many in as possible. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Javad. one area of politics which often is overlooked, not just by young people, but Britain as a whole, is local government. And local government tends to be dominated mostly by older people who've been around the block a few times. Now, how do we get more young people involved in local government? Because it's such an important aspect of governance of this country.
Are you involved in local government?
Yeah, I'm a candidate in the elections this May.
For this coming May?
Yeah, this coming May.
Okay, thanks. That's a good question. Anyone from this side? Lady over there. I think the mic is coming. Did everyone hear that question? It's a bit echoing, but great. Okay, sorry, your question. If you could say who you are and the question. Thank you.
I'm Sam. I have a question specifically for the SNP MP. Is that okay?
Sorry?
I have a question specifically for the SNP.
SNP, absolutely,
okay?
yeah.
I was going to ask, obviously before the most recent election, your party campaigned sort of on a single issue of not wanting to be a member of the UK anymore. So to me it seems almost contradictory to then run so passionately about then representing Scotland in the UK Parliament. Why go down that route and not more of a Sinn Féin route where you don't take your seats?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. The Speaker, John Burke, told me the thing that had struck him more about this Westminster Parliament than anything else was your assiduous, not you personally, your entire group, attending every debate. Whenever any one of your colleagues spoke, you were all there. Sort of almost saying, we really like this Westminster Parliament, even though we want out. A third question, let's go to the front and then we'll take some at the side in the next round.
I'm Sam. Many of you have talked about going into schools as a way of trying to encourage youngsters to be involved in politics. How would you, those that are not just disincentivised with politics, but also disincentivised with schools, how would you read
Affairs and politics are fascinating subjects. I'm not saying we should force people to take exams in them and pick up Natalie's point. Some of what we should get in education is an holistic education in all the things that matter, not just in terms of passing exams, but also in terms of things that really matter in the world. Current affairs, politics, all that stuff was back to that dining room table for me and gave me the inspiration many, many years ago. 40 years later, I was still inspired by that and willing to step forward and do this.
So Kevin, can I ask if you're going to back Caroline Lucas's PSHE education bill to broaden that education, guarantee sex and relationship education, finance education, a much broader education in food, nutrition?
I absolutely feel we should have much broader education. I was a governor at school, in a school that didn't just believe we should try and beat the system. Absolutely, we're trying to get rounded education for people. But I think that should be down to head teachers, great head teachers, who pick good teachers and motivate good teachers and provide a school, give them the autonomy to run that school in the way they see fit.
Okay. Start the Tory Green Alliance, but I think it just moved away towards the end. Hillary, you are an evangelist, and I know you always have been for politics. Obviously, you're Labour, but you, as your first answer suggested, what could schools do to generate that sense of connections that you began to talk about in your first answer? And are there some dangers in that as well?
Well, I think the first thing is not to be afraid to do what we're doing here tonight, which is gathering together to talk about what's going on in the world with a range of view. I think some schools are worried because if they have one person in from one party, then a parent might complain, well, why have you not had someone else? So it's giving the school the confidence to do that. And I think for all of us that are involved in politics, if we get an invitation to go and talk at the school, really keen to do that. I very much agree with what you said in answer to the first question about the range of responsibilities of local authorities. Right, if you think about our community, something goes wrong, what will people say to each other? Council should do something about it. And it is the means to an end. And I am passionate about devolution of power precisely because, one, it brings us all face to face with choices that have to be made in life. We experience those personally, and the same is true of politics. iDebate famously said, socialism is the language of priorities. And so I want to see schools making education about how our democracy works, how politics works, part of the curriculum, because it's about giving us, when we're young, the tools to do the job. And I just wanted to say to you, Stuart, is any consolation given your experience wandering around Parliament, when Keir Hardie first arrived in 1892, in the era when MPs all wore frock coats, and he turned up in his working clothes, and the doorkeepers looked him up and down and said, "Are you here to work on the roof?" And Keir Hardie replied famously, "No, I'm here to work on the floor of the House of Commons." And he, of course, was the first independent Labour member of Parliament. So, it's happening.
And so on that point about the SNP of Westminster, you don't want to be there, and yet you are very much there. As said, Berko has been struck by the degree to which you all attend debates and so on. Why have you opted for that approach rather than saying, right, we disapprove of this place, we want nothing to do with it?
Sam, I thought you raised a very interesting issue there. The SNP's always believed in engaging in the democracy.
Got interested in politics when I was 11 or 12, sat around the dining room table with my parents, and I think parents have a huge part to play in this. I think, to the point you made, Steve, I think we are making progress. The 74 colleagues I have that came in the 2015 intake, 10% of BME background, a lot of different career backgrounds, 35% are women, so we're making progress as a party. We've got an awful lot more to do. We need to engage more with young people. Certainly what we did around our hustings, we did 8 hustings over the election campaign in schools to try and engage with young people, to try and understand. Hopefully we feel we have a message that can suit everybody's needs and is around improving the economy, is around giving people access to the housing market, which is of huge importance to young people and something we can easily take for granted.
And Natalie, I assume with your party you do have quite a young membership, is that right? I haven't checked the figures recently.
About 30% of the membership of the Green Party is young Greens, so people under 30, which I'm pretty confident is the highest of any party.
In percentage terms?
Yep.
Yeah. And why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's partly because obviously we have policies that appeal to young people. Zero university tuition fees is a very obvious one. But actually what I find when I talk to colleges, universities, schools, actually what's even more important to young people is that we say that our schools, our universities should not be exam factories where pupils are shoved through exam after exam after exam. And we highlight issues like the fact that among under 16s the rate of depression has doubled in the past 10 years. We are really saying we get that you as a generation have been put under enormous pressure. You know, generation rent, particularly in London, but around the country, young people struggling, that not thinking about the housing ladder, that's a distant dream, thinking about being able to rent a flat on your own. And you know, our mayoral candidate in London, Sian Berry, she's a renter herself. She knows what it's like to be clinging on. And so you know, we are speaking to those experiences. But I think addressing the broader question, one of the things I want to make sure we don't do tonight is politics historically, until quite recently, was failing young people, and it did seem irrelevant, but it's changing and it's changing fast. But I don't want to blame young people for not voting. I want to blame politicians and politics for the fact that it hasn't seemed relevant, it hasn't seemed to speak to people, and therefore they haven't got engaged. And a really good example of that is the Scottish referendum. 16 and 17-year-olds got the vote. They turned out in almost the same percentages as older people, and we had nearly a 95% turnout. When politics has mattered, when the debate happens on the ground, people do vote.
Okay, thank you, which is a perfect segue into Stuart, our final panellist. To some extent, the referendum did attract a lot of young support. Could I just ask you a slightly different question, then we can open it out? And that is, I think you were 23 when you went to the House of Commons last summer. Is it an alienating place for young people? It's quite old-fashioned and ritualistic. It does many important things that affect the lives of everyone in this hall. But is it a sort? Did you feel odd when you went there, or did you feel at ease with the environment?
I think the most difficult thing when I went into Parliament is being the second youngest. Mary Black was the youngest, and she was 20, and everyone knew who Mary Black was. nobody knew who Stuart Donaldson was. So I would walk about